Long duration storage. I have found in my long experience that if you want to put people to sleep at a dinner party, talk about energy. And if you never want to be invited back, talk about energy storage. Right? And that was, I found this to be true. And yet, I have you on this panel because, as you know, I am a huge fan of energy storage, including and especially long duration energy storage for the grid. And when I wrote a story about this, maybe 6 months ago, explaining the dramatic changes in the energy storage market for the grid, it was the #1 viewed story on the Economist website for a whole week running, beating any story on Ukraine or Trump or anything else. And so the people are thirsting for this if you approach it with the right spirit. So in that spirit, tell us, your company does long duration storage. You're one of the promising, you use compressed fluid technology, which is different from some other competitors. But for people who don't follow this that closely, what is the value proposition of long duration storage? And give us an idea what that means beyond the lithium ion batteries that people are familiar with for 2 to 4 hours on the grid. That's the standard stuff you'd know about. What do you do and your competitors? What's different about your category of storage?
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. I appreciate you guys giving me some time here because it doesn't play well at parties. So I totally agree with you, Vijay. We are, as you note, we use compressed air as a basis for our storage. And what's interesting about that is a lot of people think about batteries and they sort of understand that. But we're sort of like a giant air battery underground. And so we're taking off-peak electricity, we're running it through a compressor, we're storing high-pressure air underground, and then when the grid needs it, we're running it through a turbine. What's really neat about this is that it's mechanical. There isn't performance degradation. There aren't the same supply chain issues. There's a lot of benefits to having that kind of diversity. In fact, it operates very similarly to a natural gas-fired plant, but it's just using air. And for those of you in the audience, I don't know if there's any that have some knowledge of this technology, just want to clarify. It's both fuel-free, what we do, because we take heat from our compression and store it, and it can be flexibly sited. So we don't just need to put it where, for example, there are salt caverns. We build our cavities out of hard rock using techniques that are really well known in the hydrocarbon storage industry. So what you kind of have at the end of the day is like a locatable pumped hydro-like asset that you can locate where the grid needs it, large scale. Most of our projects are about 500 megawatts and what we call intraday storage. So 8 hours of continuous discharge up to 24 hours, depending on what the grid needs.
Why is that the sweet spot? Because there's, competitors like Form want to go to 100 hours. So I hear estimates all over the place. Most storage, I think, is 2 to 4 hours at the moment in Texas and other places.
I think it's a really fair point. I think there's actually 3 main use cases. And so there's short duration storage. You've seen a lot of that built out in the form of battery projects. They're sort of doing, like if a cloud comes over a solar panel and there's a big change, they can rapidly respond and they don't need the long durations. On the flip side of that, like Form with multi-day storage, so they can give very long periods of discharge, but their efficiency is very low in doing that. And so that's great if you have like a wind farm or a wind heavy, like Colorado, and the wind goes down and you need 3 days of discharge. That might only happen a few times a year, but that's where you need it. In our case, our sweet spot is sort of where you need to replace all this retiring fossil generation and just conventional generation. And by the way, I mean, we can get into the IRA and everything else and where this is going, but we need to remember what's driving the need for long duration storage, including our intraday stuff that does effectively replace that, is the fact that there's a huge transition in the amount of load. Like the amount of demand is increasing. We talked about AI here. But even independent of that, electrification, load is increasing. Same time, a massive amount of resources are coming offline. So when I talk about energy transition, to me, it's not about decarbonization. I mean, that's a piece of it. And it's a debatable piece. So sometimes, people have different policy objectives. It is about, we would be under energy transition no matter what, because the last investment cycle in power systems around the world was 30 or 40 years ago. All this stuff is retiring. And you're seeing conventional nuclear having to be refurbished, new repowering of gas plants. Massive.
So is this a grid reliability play for you, or is it
100%.
it's not an arbitrage play like the short term would be California's so-called duck curve, or,
Yep.
and again, a spike in prices in Texas, which is a liberalized ERCOT market.
Yep.
You can arbitrage and make huge financial returns with those batteries. That's why they're coming
Exactly,
on.
yeah.
Your angle or your value proposition is different. Am I right?
Yeah, and all these use cases have a slightly different angle. So we still provide that arbitrage. That's important. We can integrate wind and solar, and that's a big piece of what we can provide.
Can you do rapid response or your slow response?
We're kind of operate like a very fast responding gas plant. So it's like there haven't been batteries on the grid before. They manage the grid accordingly. We can also pair really short duration batteries with our system. So there's all kinds of ways we can do that. But the primary use case, to your point, Vijay, is around capacity. So when these plants are coming offline or there's a transmission need, really what they're finding is 4 hours is not enough. They need 8 hours, they need 12 hours, 16 hours. That can reliably replace these conventional capacity assets. So that's the critical use case right now. And it's very bipartisan. And maybe just to add a point earlier, there's a really insightful question in the audience about state level policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go a step further. I think Jeremy responded to that really well, but I would go even a step further and say, actually, most of the policy, most of what's driving the investments is at the state level. They're the ones who have to keep the lights on. The regional transmission organizations like PJM, New York ISO, they have to keep the lights on. And the vertically integrated utilities like Xcel, Dominion, all these other entities, they are doing what they need to do regardless. And the reality is, do incentives help? Yes. We can talk about our projects and how they fit in. But really what's happening is it's a big game of like squeezing the balloon. It's sort of like the states are going to have to pay more in the absence of those incentives. The infrastructure needs to be built regardless. Now, no one wants big policy shifts, and there's probably more efficient ways and less efficient ways to do things. But that's kind of our big picture view of what's happening here. And in fact, is what's driving a lot of our project pipeline. We have a 500 megawatt, 8-hour project in California that's nearing financial close early next year.
You have one in Australia?
We have one in Australia. That's our next one. So that's going to be starting construction at the beginning of next year.
How big will that be?
200 megawatts,
right.
8 hours. Really interesting application because it is the first transmission alternative in Australia. So we've set the regulatory precedent.
What does that mean
for that? It means they would need to build out we are an alternative to doing that, but it has to be paid for like transmission. That's a whole different regulatory construct. Most areas of the US don't even have that construct in place yet. So we've set that precedent in Australia. We're also doing one of the world's largest mini grids. So when that line does go down, our long duration storage forms the basis of all this renewable generation, tons of solar, tons of wind there. It all gets knocked off when that line goes down. Instead, we form a microgrid that keeps the lights on, the mine on. It's a town of 25,000 people.
This is a really a novel concept. How many of you are familiar with energy storage as transmission as a concept? Is that something, okay, a small handful. So this is an example, including with the interesting microgrid attached. There's a couple of cases in Europe as well. They're pioneering in Germany and Scandinavia. I think maybe one of the competitors you might have, Fluor, I don't know if you consider them a competitor, but there's certainly a big battery company. They're involved in providing large batteries that can, if you have two large transmission lines, one's supporting the other, you can only run each at 50% in order to handle the other if the other goes down. If you can station big batteries on either end of the congestion, you can then run both those lines at much higher throughput. In other words, you suddenly, without having to build any new transmission lines, can suddenly find a lot more ability to run power. So that's the basic concept as I understand it. And so this is a whole new way of thinking about how to get around the NIMBY problem or not having to spread a lot of massive capex on transmission lines, which has proved impossible in developed countries. And so I will watch this space. That's an interesting opportunity if we can figure out how to pay for it or how to regulate it in such a way that you get a proper return.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I do want to come to one thing that you said in passing, there's bipartisan support. There is at the moment, though, I think you have a DOE loan of, was it 1.76 billion, almost 1.8 billion. I'm hearing some rumors that maybe that might be under scrutiny with the, the kind of DOGE and cost-cutting efforts going on in Washington. That's going to be a big blow, isn't it, for you?
Well, I think a couple of thoughts there. So the first is it's fair to say all projects are under review that have a DOE loan guarantee. That would be normal course for really any new administration coming in. We actually feel pretty confident about that loan, in part because, I mean, I can't speak for the DOE, but it does actually fit their reliability objectives, which have already been clarified as one of the key pillars. And so we're looking forward to hitting the conditions of that loan, so on and so forth. What I will say, however, as well, is it kind of goes back to the earlier point of what's the purpose of the facility. California needs this facility. We were about 12% of the overall interconnection capacity that can be delivered into the state just with that project. This is a reliability asset. We will get commercial debt financing if necessary. That's obviously not what we want if we can avoid it. Similarly with the IRA, we are expecting to apply input tax credits to that project. I don't want to go over a lot of the discussion that was already here. I think it was really insightful. I will point out that the House bill is not what to expect, right? Like that was very much a Freedom Caucus. We're putting a line in the sand. We're going to see what comes out of the Senate. What encourages me out of the Senate is really, it's more about the phase down. And we expect to be in a good position for that. But quite frankly, we have 3 other projects that we're looking to apply ITCs towards across the US, in Arizona, in New York. And it's not a coincidence that these are jurisdictions that have real long duration storage needs and have set mandates in place. And that's where we're getting our offtake contracts accordingly. Maybe the last point, this will be obvious to you, Vijay, but sometimes we're in, the beating heart of capitalism in America here, and we think about the US, but there's a whole world out there too. And certainly Hydrostor is most active in Australia. We have projects that are supporting nuclear in Ontario. So we're actually an Ontario-based company. Interestingly, Ontario is one of the largest nuclear jurisdictions in the world. I think you've heard this administration talk about nuclear. They're one of the first jurisdictions in North America beyond California and New York to put out a mandate saying they need 8-hour plus storage because it's important for nuclear. Even the use case you were talking about, the 2 ends.
Because of outages or some other reason?
Because it's baseload and you need to be able to provide capacity at different times. So they have a lot of energy and not enough capacity when the grid needs it. What better way to do that than storage and long duration storage? Your use case for congestion on each end of the line. Storage is such a bipartisan asset, like more so than the others that have been talked about. We're very big in Australia. We've seen massive swings in government there, and it is continued focus on long duration storage. Frankly, they even continue focus on solar and wind because it's the cheapest energy source, even though you do need to integrate it with some other assets.
Any quick question before we run out of time? Here's your chance to ask a long duration storage
I know you've been waiting to do
Maven. There's only 3 of them in the world. So if not, I will ask a question. You talked about this being bipartisan. I know you're emphasizing this, but didn't the storage industry make a mistake by getting into bed with the renewables industry? What I hear in Washington, and I see from Republican politicians, is storage is painted with the same brush as renewables because solar plus storage is sort of now become a thing. Not only that, the Lobbying Association for Storage, at least the main one, merged with the renewables lobby and is now the American Clean Power, ACP, which is a prominent renewables lobby. Whereas by definition, storage is technology neutral. You can store coal power as well as you can store wind, but that's not the game in Washington. That's not how it's perceived. Is it fair to make that criticism?
Well, I mean, I don't want to speak for the storage industry per se or ACP. We are a member. I will tell you that internally in Hydrostor, that is our mantra. So we don't say it's just about renewable integration any more than we just say it's only about resiliency and only about it. It is about all these things. And we have very sophisticated analytical capabilities in our company because we're not trying to put a wig on a pig. We're just trying to say, does this make economic sense or does it not? Does it fit with a particular policy objective? Is it helping reliability? The storage industry should have that message. when you have different administrations in and you want to ride a coattail, I don't know. We could debate that till the cows come home. But I will say, frankly, it is 100% true, however, that energy storage does serve all these use cases. And I think that's increasingly being recognized within the administration as well, because they want to keep the lights on too.
All right. Well, thank you for de-wigging the pig. We appreciate your Canadian anachronisms.
Yeah, sorry.
Good to have you here. Thank you.